Today, Ariel Helwani and Chael Sonnen got into a heated argument over how we should all feel about the Francis Ngannou situation. Chael argues that Ariel is not really a good friend of Francis, and he's trying to use this as a way to show that someone is superior over the UFC. But Ariel was trying to drop straight facts on Chael, who refused to even hear or review those facts. And what about the middle? Somewhere in the middle is the MMA fan caught in a whirlwind of Chaelisms and Arielisms. And we're going to discuss those today on this episode of Matter of Fact MMA. Let's go. What's up? What's happening? We right back at it. We right back with it. First of all, before I get into the Ariel Chael drama, which is it's weird. It's hard to say that Ariel and Chael, Chael and Ariel, Ariel and Chael. It's hard to say. Anyway, before we get off into that, I will say I know that there is a card going down this Saturday night in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I will be doing a quick breakdown of that card. I'm probably going to post that tomorrow because, to be honest with you, and no disrespect to anybody on that card, I'm not super excited about it, but I will be breaking down definitely the main card and maybe a couple of the prelim fights. But for right now, let's get into this Ariel. See, I had trouble saying it. Ariel and Chael drama. So yesterday, Ariel Heelwani brings Chael Sonnen onto the MMA Hour, in which they get into a heated argument over Francis Ngannou leaving the UFC, and basically Ariel wanted Chael to apologize and admit that he was right, that Francis should have left, and that Francis made the correct decision. Chael was trying to argue a different point. And that's what we're going to discuss. So let's start with, we all kind of have an idea of Ariel's point. Let's just start with Chael's. Chael's point is not that Francis didn't make a good decision, financially, so to speak, to go and box Tyson Fury. What his point is that the only way that this worked out for him in his favor is that he did so well in the physical contest against Tyson Fury. Because if he would have went out there and got knocked out or washed like a lot of us thought he was going to, then it technically wouldn't have been a win. He would have gotten paid roughly around $10 million, but Chael's argument is that he would have made that or close to that within a few fights in the UFC. Now, we all know Chael is a company guy, so he's usually going to lean towards the UFC. So, I mean, if you can go make all of that money in one night versus 3 or 4 fights or 6 fights in the UFC, you might as well go do it that one night. However, what Chael was arguing is that where Francis what he really did that was so great was him being able to compete and arguably beat Tyson Fury on that Saturday night. That's where he really made his stock robust, if you will. You know what I'm saying? That's when his stock really rose, is in the fact that he could compete. And so what he was trying to tell Ariel is, you're out here taking a victory lap for something that was 100% a gamble. No one was making videos talking about Francis Ngannou was going to wash Tyson Fury. No one was doing that. It was a 100% gamble on Ariel's part to back Francis Ngannou. And it worked out, and it paid off. But the reality of it is that you can't go around telling everybody you need to apologize. You need to say you're sorry. You need to admit that I'm right because it worked. Because honestly, no one saw that happening. And it was almost unfathomable that it would happen. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of what he was arguing. He was also arguing the point that Ariel is out here, trying to champion Francis Ngannou. But the reality of it is he's for one saying that we did it, we won, we did it, as if he was there fighting with Francis. But also, Chael's point is that what are you happy about, Ariel? Because you're trying to make everyone believe that you're happy that he made all this money. But the reality of it is as soon as he signed the fight deal, as soon as the ink was dry, he already had the money. The $10 million was going to get deposited. And Chael even brought that point up. He already had the $10 million. But you weren't necessarily cheering then. You weren't cheering until the physical contest happened, in which he went out there and he put on a clinic somewhat with Tyson Fury. And now all of a sudden you're cheering and you're saying this, you're saying that. That was his point, in which Ariel was not willing to concede to. So now this is what I'll say when you talk about Ariel Helwani. I will say I do enjoy Ariel's show from time to time. I've said on my videos that the only time I can personally enjoy the MMA hour is when Ariel sits back, generally shuts up, and just kind of rattles off questions to the fighters, and he lets the fighters talk and lets them really show their personality and, you know, all of their quirks and everything like that. When he comes in it trying to really impose his points of view and his rhetoric, that to me is when it's like watching a political show. And I don't really watch political stuff or do politics, but that's what it's like. Because you have someone that will never admit that they're wrong, will never admit that they took a L. They will always continue to drum up facts, just out of nowhere, create facts, create evidence to support their argument. That's what happens in political debates, which is why they've always been pointless to me. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're not solving anything. Nothing is happening. Where Ariel is very lethal in his space is that the most lethal person to ever try to argue a point with or debate is a person that is able to stay extremely calm, keep their wits about themselves, and still argue or debate their points, which is what Ariel Helwani is stellar at. And most fighters and most, you know, everybody generally takes an L to him because he has that ability. Most of the time, Ariel Helwani is wrong. All right, let's just be real about it. Most of the time, a lot of his points are terrible. Most of the time, he's wrong. I mean, Connor Burks and New York Rick have to back him because he's their boss, and they're on his show. But most of the time, when you walk these streets, nobody's really siding with Ariel most of the time. Most of his points are incorrect. They're generally biased. But his ability to stay calm and deliver a message or deliver an argument or a debate without getting upset and losing his point is where he generally beats these people, which is kind of what happened with his argument with Chael. And as they go back and forth, the reality of it is, when you're talking about Ariel, if you're Francis Ngannou's friend and you're cheering for him because he left the UFC, he gambled on himself, he got the fight with Tyson Fury, he got the PFL deal, and then he got paid. Chael is correct in that instance, because once the ink was dry on that contract with Tyson Fury, he was already $10 million up. Ariel, while he did campaign during that time, that wasn't the major win for Francis or for Ariel, which is what Chael was trying to prove, is you didn't start, really campaigning and showboating and parading around your office and talking about, apologize to me, apologize. You didn't start doing all of that when he got the money. You started doing all of that once your 100% horrible gamble paid off because he was competitive and arguably beat Tyson Fury in a boxing match. That's when you started parading around and you're giving, he did a whole show he did a whole show about receipts. And he's giving receipts of all of these fighters and all these people. He was even giving receipts about John Jones. And John Jones actually praised Francis after the fight. Said he did a great job. I'm happy for him. I'm proud of what he did for the sport. And Ariel was still going at him because he can't let this go. Because this is where he's like one of those political dudes that likes to get in there and argue these points and always shift the narrative, always deflect, project, change the topic, change the subject in order for him to win 90% of his arguments. So the fact of the matter is that you didn't start parading around till Francis looked good in that fight. Then you can look at it and say, not only did he get the money, but he also was competitive, arguably beat Tyson Fury. Now it's my chance to stick it to the UFC and the Dana White and parade around. Which, that's fine. We all love to parade around and get happy when things that we predicted or that we wanted to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's the fact that Ariel twists it and goes too far with it and vilifies people that are against his position. You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of the basis of the argument. And that's kind of the reality. Now, when they got into the business side of it, Ariel did have a valid point because we're talking about Saudi money. And Saudi money, they're not worried about turning a profit. They're getting profits in other areas, tremendous profits. So they're not really worried about it. The pay-per-view sold good, if everything, who's getting points on it and all this. They could care less. They could care less. That's where Chael was kind of antiquated in his thought, and he's thinking that's the old pay-per-view model, and he did have a point, The reason why the belt wasn't on the line, Tyson Fury's belt, is because they did not have a rematch clause in there. They had nothing on paper that said that if Francis goes out here, beats Tyson, and takes our belts, that we're going to get another fight with him. I found this so interesting to watch this play out because while it's not like, Ariel is like the biggest villain of all time, the biggest enemy of the state of all time. That's not what any of this is about. But it's so interesting to see a guy that is supposed to be so nice, so, he's snowflakish, you know what I'm saying? He's supposed to be this nice guy. He's all pillow soft, and he wants to include everybody, and he hates bullies, and he, and everybody, and he's all championing mental health and doing all these things. But the reality of it is, in these arguments, you can see the real him and the devil horns, you know what I'm saying, kind of peek through. And you can kind of see that this guy really is kind of like one of those political dudes. He's almost like an MMA Bill O'Reilly to a certain extent. You know what I'm saying? And that's just kind of what it is. And so, to watch him try to argue these points against Chael, while he did have a lot of valid points, you're still like, look at Ariel, this dude is a piece of work. Are you seeing this? So that's kind of what I found to be so interesting about this exchange. At the end of the day, to sum it all up, shout out to Francis Ngannou. He gambled on himself and he won. He was able to get not only paid for this fight, he was competitive, arguably should have won that fight if the judges would have just gave it to him or, wouldn't have been biased, so to speak. And that's good on him. When you're looking at Ariel Helwani, as Chael told him, you're trying to use this in your favor. You're not worried about Francis for real. You're trying to use this in your favor to take a shot at Dana White, to stab at the UFC, to stab at the people that you feel like wronged you. And you're trying to use this against them. When the reality of it is, if you're really Francis Ngannou's friend, you should have just been cheering just because he inked the deal, let alone goes out there, actually fights and does this and does that. And then when he goes out there and fights and wins the fight, you should really be going off about him winning the fight and him doing so well in the fight, not sticking it to the people that didn't agree with your point of view to the situation. That's what makes him sneaky. That's what makes him dirty. That's what makes him low down, can't be trusted, a dog, a politician, Bill O'Reilly, so on and so forth. That's what makes him all of those things. And I don't think he realizes that's why in the MMA sphere, MMA media, everyone enjoys criticizing you more and disliking you more, because whether you see it or you don't see it, you're just not a likable person. And when Ariel was he's still nerdy, but when he was the extremely nerdy guy, and he was, oh, I've got Rampage on today, and he did all of these things, he was likable. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't trying to be tough. He wasn't out here truly arguing points and points of views. He was just delivering news and telling these fighters stories. Now, it seems to me that he is more interested in telling the Ariel Helwani story than the fighter stories. And that's what I found to be so interesting about this back and forth debate between these two. Nevertheless, it was definitely, if you haven't seen the video yet on MMAfighting.com, it's great. Check it out. You know, both sides have some pretty good valid points. And that's just what it is. Like I said, we're going to be back with the UFC Sao Paulo breakdown of at least the main card, probably a few of the prelim fights, and I'll be right back with you. That's going to drop either later on today or tomorrow, being Friday. So either way, I appreciate you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA, and I'll check you next time. Peace.